Hello.
Hello.
Welcome to our unboxing maths session on our Facebook page tonight. Let us know if you're there. Hard when you're going live and you can't really see who's watching. So do say hello in the comments and let us know if you're listening. We're going to be talking about our experience of unschooling maths. Well, I can see somebody's tuned in, Krish, so we're away. Hey, it's Dawn.
Hi, Dawn.
Hi, Dawn. Good to see you there. Thanks for saying hello. If you're there, do say hi in the comments so we can see who we've got. Oh, Gemma's here. Hiya. Naomi, hello. Oh, that's nice. Great. A few more people might trickle in and join us, but at least we know you can see us. I always get nervous going live. So it's good to see you. And tonight we're going to be talking about maths, because it seems to be a subject that people get quite stressed about. And so we're going to be talking a bit about why that might be, and about our rather alternative approach to maths in our household, both from the perspective of being unschooling parents and also from Krish's long experience of being a secondary maths teacher. So it'd be great to have your comments and questions in the chat too as we go along. So first of all, just to introduce ourselves, especially if you haven't joined us here in this space before. My name's Alice Kimasia and this is my husband Krish, and we have 4 sons who are now aged 19, nearly 18, 15 and almost 9. And we have been unschooling them for about the last 11 years. So our younger 2 boys have never been to school, and the older 2 had kind of quite minimal school experience through their compulsory educational years. Oh, it's Fadzai as well. Hello. Yeah, so we've taken quite a relaxed approach to the learning of, or the acquisition of, mathematical understanding in our family. And I think it's fair to say that our approach has relaxed over those years as we've relaxed as parents and as educators. Hi, Rachel. So yeah, I think when you start out as a home educator and you're trying to like figure out what approach you want to take, how your children learn, how you're going to work best together, it does take a bit of trial and error, and we experimented with various things and tried different approaches. And I think over the years, generally our approach to the boys' education relaxed. And the reason for that really is that as you see your children learning and growing in understanding and developing their skills and abilities in front of you day after day, year after year, you do grow in confidence and you do begin to trust much more in that process and in your children as learners and in yourself as well as their primary educator. And if you were with me on the live last month, I talked about trust. I kicked off my 2021 lives by talking about trust, because I think it's probably the most fundamental foundation really for unschooling. So you can always watch that back by scrolling down the Facebook page if you're interested. But as you see children learning in front of you in this way, your trust grows, and so your confidence grows. And I think that takes the pressure off and enables you to relax more. And that has certainly happened for us over the past 11 years. Of course, it helps me, doesn't it, that I'm married to a maths teacher who used to come in from school every day and reassure me and kind of see what the boys were doing and draw some of the maths out of their learning. It is a Facebook Live, Denise. Are we not moving? You should be able to see us chatting. Can other people hear us? Can you just put in the chat if you can hear us okay talking? Because because Denise is saying she can't hear us talking.
We're not covering the mic.
No, we're not covering the mic, so it should be going live. Just want to check.
Can you hear us? Just say yes or.
Fadzai is saying try refreshing your page, Denise. Rachel can hear us. Yes, okay. Abby's there too. She can see and hear us fine. Okay, yeah. Sometimes it does freeze a bit. Yeah. So Denise, it must be your end. So just try refreshing us and see if you can hear us. Then you should hear us. She should be able to hear us talking. Thanks, Dawn. Great. So yeah, we are audible. So that's good. Yeah. So we have definitely relaxed our approach. So I'm kind of giving you the wisdom of many years of experience over that process. So yeah, should we talk a bit about parents' concerns about maths first? Because I think that even amongst parents who take quite a relaxed approach to their children's education, or who are very willing and able to kind of unschool other subjects and maybe not follow curriculum and be quite child-led, might still struggle and feel a stress around taking a more relaxed approach to maths, Krish. So why do you think that is?
Well, actually, I think I know what it is, but what I'd really like is for you guys to put very briefly in maybe a sentence what it is that you're worried about, or maybe you're not worried. Maybe I'm making the wrong assumption, but why are you here? Would be the right question.
Well, that's a good question.
Why are you here? What do you want to know, or what do you want to get out from this live? Just type it into the chat.
Yeah, that would be good. Or maybe you've got a burning question. Oh, hello, Kat. Yeah, but I was just thinking, like, generally of talking about your experience with when you talk to parents about maths.
Yeah, so I think parents are really, a lot of parents are very concerned, or perhaps parents had a really bad experience themselves as a student, and they kind of have this fear of maths. So that's really quite common. And it's funny. You get people who say, "Oh, I don't like maths," or "I can't do maths," but they never say, "Oh, I can't do English," or "I can't do geography," or "I can't do history." It's always maths. So that's why is that? What is it about maths that is different to the other subjects? Is it your school experience? Is it just a fear? Is it because you can't remember how to do things, which is common? Or I think a lot of people think that maths is about learning rules and, oh, what rule do I need to use to do this type of problem? And I want to try and unpack that and maybe find another way of doing things, and sort of helping your children interact with maths in a more healthy way and a more playful way, if that makes any sense. So I want to do that. So I'm just reading some comments.
Yeah, Rachel's saying she'd like to move over to child-led, but she panics about maths, knowing that he's learning without the books.
Yeah.
Naomi says, I imagine it might be because it was taught to us in a dry way, removed from practical application, maybe. Yeah, I think like certainly when you've been talking to parents recently, like a lot of people do seem to have almost like an anxiety that they go into when they're faced with maths, or, you know, like that kind of freeze response. And the problem with anxieties like that is that a parent's anxiety can then come, you know,
it interferes and comes in the way. So if you project fear about maths to your children, they're going to have that fear as well. So the moment you say, I can't do maths, or I was never very good at maths, you're actually, what you're saying to your child is, it's okay to fear maths, and it's okay to not be able to do maths, if you can avoid doing that, that's much better for your children, because they'll have a healthy kind of relationship with maths, if that makes sense. And maths is kind of all around us anyway, so we live in a sort of mathematical society, and a kind of most of the maths that we encounter now is kind of financial, because we all have to deal with money. So yeah, so let's not fear it. So
Yeah.
are there any burning questions? Like,
well, there's quite a few things coming in the chat now. I'm just kind of skimming a little bit. So Abby's saying they've been home editing, got increasingly more relaxed, but I've never managed to get the hang of doing maths with them. We've just not settled on a way that works. And as time goes by, I feel more pressure to get it sorted. Eldest is 12. Kat saying there's pressure from the government. You're supposed to have maths GCSE, which puts pressure on you as parents to ensure they have the qualification. I think that's something, isn't it? Like, as because it's such a core subject, and there's so much emphasis on it in schools, and the importance of getting your maths GCSE, I think that puts the pressure on parents to feel that they need to do it right. And I think that a lot of us have from school this fear of getting maths wrong, and of not wanting to kind of experiment and play around with it for fear of that, and for getting it wrong for our kids. So yeah, perhaps we can look a bit more about that.
So I think when your kids are young, I mean, Alice said before that I was a secondary maths school teacher, and I'd been a maths teacher for 20 years. And what I saw in the classroom was that even though by year 11 they have been in school for 11 years and they're ready to take their GCSEs, some learners made very little progress, and I was wondering why they had, and what were the sticking points, or was it because there was a very poor foundation of maths right at the beginning? And I think, especially when it comes to things like learning about probability and stuff like that, I would put it down to a lack of play in the early years. So play is really, really important. And unfortunately, governments in recent years and in previous years have taken less and less. They've taken out play in the early years. So by after after nursery, they're in year one, and they're straight into full
reception first.
Oh, sorry, after reception, they're in year one, and they're straight into formal maths. Whereas I think that is far too early to formalize maths. And what needs to be happening is just there need to be kind of structured play activities. Playing with sand or playing with cups and pouring sand into different cups gives children an idea of proportion, or just sort of basic counting, which they do, I know, but that's really important. What does 10 look like? And you can use these I can't remember what they're called now, these kind of sticks or cubes,
rods, like rods.
Or rods. Yeah, I think there's a special
rods.
Yeah, what's it called?
Cuisinart
rods, that's right. So you can use those, and that's a very visual way of kind of presenting number. And if
you could use Lego bricks in a stack,
and you can use Lego bricks, and you can, Lego's great, because when you're building a car or house or whatever out of Lego and following the instructions, you are having to count. So all those things are really helpful. So also, you can play, for example, a simple game like Snakes and Ladders with 2 dice, and then with the 2 dice you're having to add up those
straight away.
Those numbers straight away, and you've got a dice aren't numbered. they've got dots, haven't they, or spots, so they're having to add up, and they do add up very quickly when they're playing with dice. So playing snakes and ladders is a perfectly good way of learning how to add.
So you're talking about building that conceptual mathematical understanding through play, and then that becomes the foundation that later, like more abstract mathematical understanding then hangs upon, right? But if you haven't had that opportunity to conceptually understand mathematical concepts, you're going too quickly to the symbolic, more abstract code, if you like.
Yeah, and
then it's difficult to actually have a concrete understanding.
I mean, even before, I mean, you could do that with chocolates. Like if you gave your young children chocolates and you didn't split it evenly, they will soon notice that you didn't split it evenly. So you can talk about language like you've got more, I've got less, and so that sort of thing. And maybe they might say, well, you've got two more. They might even say it, and they've done some maths, and you will pick it up straight away. Well, you know, because they'll want to know, they'll want to even out the chocolate buttons or whatever it is that they want. So even giving them an unfair amount of chocolate is a maths activity, because they will want to make sure that they're sharing it out equally. So, you know, you can use, before you do maths, you can do language of maths, like adding up. This is more, this is less. You've got more, you've got less. How many more have I got compared to you? And they will be doing it because they want as much chocolate as you do.
Of course.
So
it has to be fair. There's a great question there from Naomi. She says, with Lego, her son is 7, loves symmetry and strives to make symmetrical flying things. Should she leave him to it, or engage and talk about it, or ask about it, or propose an extension idea?
No, just yeah, I would just leave him to it. I mean, proposing extension ideas is a really good idea, but that's interesting that it's symmetry, because I'm just working on a project brief on symmetry, and one of the things I suggest is that they build something on with Lego. But that if your kids like Minecraft as well, which our kids do or did, they can build stuff in the Minecraft world, or build houses or planes or whatever. But yeah, I mean, building with Lego to learn about symmetry is great.
There's quite a few people asking about kind of the transition up into the secondary years. So I think if we're just going to talk about primary for a little bit longer, and then we're going to move on up and talk about secondary, and then about some of our own experience with tackling maths at higher levels, later years, and about finding a way forward for your children and your families. So yeah, bear with us if we're not just getting to those questions right now. But you might want to read that one there from Claire while I'm talking. Yeah, I have a belief that the conceptual mathematics of the primary curriculum can be instilled through play and exploration right through the primary years. And I'm now home educating my 4th son, and so I do feel relaxed with him about his mathematical understanding. So we're talking about using play approaches, using real life situations and encounters, and you know, the things that the children are doing in their real day-to-day lives, and crucially about the conversations that you're having with your children all the time. And if you are home educating and you're taking quite a relaxed approach to other subjects, I'd really encourage you to be brave enough to take the same kind of approach to maths, and not to let it be a kind of scary unknown thing that you know, you get stressed about and worry that you're not quite doing it right. So we had a few things that we thought we could share about the different ways you might explore maths in the primary years. First of all, so for example, you're always talking about how good games are. There's so many brilliant games for developing mathematical thinking.
Yeah, there's some really good games. You know, Snakes and ladders for basic sort of counting is really good. Counting the dice and counting the moves. But then, you know, if you want more complicated games, like Monopoly is really good because you have to deal with money, and they kind of just do it hopefully naturally while playing, so they're learning through play, and that's quite good. But any sort of card games like Uno are really good because you have this situation where you pick up 2 and then someone else puts another pick up 2 down, so you pick up 4, and then so they're adding up quite quickly. So
Strategy.
Game they help you think logically, and that's what you want to encourage in your kids, how to
flickering a little bit with our image. I hope you can still hear us. Yeah, did you say Monopoly and things like that?
Yeah, so Monopoly, anything, even a game like Cluedo helps you think logically, because you're thinking it can't be a Colonel Mustard in that room because I've already crossed that out, and that helps you with your deduction skills, which is also a mathematical skill. So any game is helping you. Chess is brilliant as well.
Chess, yes. So it's interesting because when our eldest boys were small, we lived in Turkey, and in Turkey, chess is a very fundamental part of the early years curriculum. So it's taught in nursery. So before they're reading, writing, anything like that, they're playing chess. And it was fascinating for our eldest son to learn chess in another language, and he still loves chess. It's really good, isn't it, for strategic thinking and so on. And yeah, do put, if you've got suggestions from your own homes, do put them in the comments, because everybody will benefit from everybody else's ideas.
GeoMags is brilliant for making 3D shapes, and then you can talk about edges and vertices and faces and all those things. So that's really, really good as well.
Quirkle's a good favourite in our house.
We love Quirkle patterns. And again, they're looking at the Quirkle board for anyone who's played it, and they're thinking, well, I'm not going to get that because those are all used up, all the squares are used up, and so on. So, and they're also thinking about probability, like what's the chance of me getting a line of 5 or 6. So those are always good. Connect 4 is brilliant, and our boys love. Now, okay, I understand that doesn't relate to the maths that they do at school,
but it does.
But it does because it's the concepts and the thinking that's really important. So don't think all we're doing is playing games. Actually, they are learning a lot from the games, and they're enjoying it, and they're enjoying puzzling things out. And as long as they are enjoying puzzling things out, they are ready to do the puzzle when it comes to maths, like formal maths. So this is part of it.
Yeah,
so
it's like the concrete understanding that underlays the abstract thinking, isn't it?
Exactly.
Claire's recommending Rush Hour, which is another
Rush Hour is brilliant.
That's a kind of logic problem solving game
where you're stuck in a car park and you've got to move out. Brilliant.
I'll put a post up, Naomi, probably tomorrow, with all the maths. I've done it before, I'll do it again with a lot of the maths resources that we're mentioning and that we use. Another one is like baking and cooking, isn't it? And using weights and measures and having a concept of
proportions, capacity,
and so on.
weight. And if you could ever get a hold of one, we've got one, having those scales where you've actually got a balance really helps, because you can use that for things like equations where things have to balance. So
interesting.
Having
actually,
one of those around is good.
It was actually Victoria's scale that we borrowed. we had it for quite a while. And then Zephan spent ages. You know what he liked to do? He just invented this game where he would weigh all his soft toys in one of those balance scales, putting the weights on. And then, you know, quite out of his own interest, he wanted to make a chart where he wrote down how much each bear weighed, each toy. So he had a list of all their names and what they weighed. And the other things Zephan's done from just exploring weights and measures and comparing quantities and things, is he then quite likes making graphs, because he's seen graphs in other places. He's like, oh, I'm going to make a graph of that. And so these things and these skills emerge from the things that we're doing at home together, and the games that he's playing. And so it happens very naturally. And then we're able to just kind of capture the moment and talk through what he's doing and build his skills in that area in the moment. So that was another important thing I was going to say, was about responding to these things as they're encountered in the moment. And then it's very real, isn't it? Because it's a problem or something tangible that they're faced with right there in reality, and then that sticks in their memories and understanding. I think it's really, really important.
Exactly, yeah, and all sorts of things come out of it. And so Alice was just mentioning sort of graphs, or you know, you could do bar graphs. But how could you do bar graphs? Well, you could use those Lego bricks as bars. So, okay, how many people like M&Ms, and 3 people like M&Ms, so that you could put 3 bricks for M&Ms and get a sense of what a bar graph looks like before you get onto the drawing. So
you're really understanding what it represents before you're just moving on to just looking at an image and then being expected to understand what that means without having had the chance to explore the ideas. I hope that's kind of coming through, that we're talking about laying a really solid foundation of concrete, tangible experience before you hang the abstract concepts on top of that. You could probably say a bit more about baking and cooking and measuring.
When they're following a recipe, and you've got all the quantities, so they've got to measure the quantities and actually read the scale on the, if you've got one of those scales with the scale, which you have to read, then they're learning how to do that. And if it's in between 10 and 15, well, what number is it going to be?
Halfway.
And
doubling and tripling recipes. Like we often have to double the pancake mix recipe in our house because there's lots of
so if the recipe's for 4 and you've got 8 in your house,
doubling up.
You have to, they've got to work out how to sort of double the quantities. But at least, you know, before all the maths takes place, they've noticed, oh, I've got twice as many people, so everything has to double. And you've had that conversation before you start doubling the numbers. So those conversations are really, really important, because they are the things that will build their mathematical understanding. So the conversation is worth more than doing the maths, because you can do the maths with the calculator. That's what calculators are for. But I know they have to learn how to times and add and so on, but their future is going to be full of calculators. I mean, hopefully they can do it in their head, but they need to know what to do with numbers as well.
You need to know whether you need to add or take away or times, but you can actually do calculations with calculators, right? That's what they're for.
Yeah.
So I love all the different suggestions that are coming up in the comments. Which is brilliant to have them there with us talking. So that's great. Keep putting them in, all the ideas that you guys have got. Even measuring, like the other day, Zephan has been back revisiting dinosaurs again this week. This is an interest that resurfaces periodically, but he was talking about some great ancient sea monster. I can't remember what it was called. And it was, I can't remember how many meters it was, like 7 meters or something, this monster. And he was like, whoa, and I said, well, how long is that? How long do you think that is? And we have this discussion, you know, well, would it be as long as the garden? You can go out and measure, you know, how long is 7 meters? And so from our conversation and his thinking and his encounters comes this conceptual understanding. Then he can envisage, well, what does 7 meters actually look like? rather than it just being 7M on a piece of paper. And these conversations really do emerge very naturally if you're paying attention and if you're listening to what your children are saying and what they're interested in. So yeah, the conversations are great.
Yeah, and one thing that helps with their maths is money. So giving your kids a little bit of pocket money is actually really helpful, because you suddenly realize how careful, well, actually not all of our kids were that careful. Some of them just spend it as they, but then our kids do kind of learn to save up, and when they want to, they do spend the money, and they really think about whether it's worth it, or whether they can get a better deal on an item that they like, or they kind of shop around, and they start to understand the value of money. Or our boys will often go to the supermarket and walk on their own and buy things, like buy bread or buy milk for us, just to understand the value of money. I mean, we obviously we give them the money to do that, but they start to have a handle on money as well. So money's really important as well.
We did give them, they did all have their own bank account from 7, so that they've got their own money to manage. And it was particularly interesting, like if it's somebody's birthday or they want to buy somebody a gift, and thinking about how much they've got and how far that will go. And yeah, so they giving them that control for their own money has been a really good learning experience. And also, of course, they want to make money as they get a bit older as well, and like figuring out what they might be able to make and sell, and what the profits will be, and all of that kind of business acumen has been part of their learning as well. And there's a lot about money encapsulated in that, isn't there?
Yeah.
So yeah, there's just so many things you can do through those primary years, and so much that emerges, and so many different ways in which you can find the maths and draw it out and play with it and enjoy it, and it becomes just another way of playing. We don't have this barrier between work and play, between maths, which is scary or something difficult. It's just another way of exploring the world, another way of understanding, another way of playing, another way of representing things. And all our boys came to, even like be writing down sums and things. They'd be, how do you, I'm talking about when they're like 4 or something. They would be playing with the idea that one number and another number make a third number, and then they would want to know how to represent that. And so in that moment, you would show them clearly, and it hangs on to that developing understanding. And because it's in context, the way that they build that web of knowledge and understanding, and the way that it hangs together, and the way that they retain it, and then build upon it as they grow, is really wonderful.
And even before they get to, I think I said this before, but even before they get to the numbers, if you've got these, I don't know, M&Ms and these M&Ms, how many have I got all together, and what are they doing? And so hopefully they're saying that they're adding. So those conversations are important, because they have to understand that they're adding those two quantities, right? And similarly, if you've got a quantity of chocolate buttons or whatever else, Moams, and you take some of those Moams away, then what mathematical operation are you doing? And again, those conversations are important.
There's some interesting things coming into the chat as well, different people's experiences, and Claire Gillespie, about George designing games in Roblox, and about money, spending money on advertising his own game, advertising his game, working out where to invest his money, how long to advertise for, whether the investment is worth it. For the amount of people to come and play the game. It's great, real life maths, absolutely.
That is, definitely. So anything like that.
And also Gemma is got some interesting perspective here because she's a music teacher. So she's thinking about the connections between music and maths, the delay in time in music, and talking about internet delay as a topic. That's interesting. And even some of the issues that we've all been facing during the pandemic, you know, talking about the real life challenges that we've been facing. We've been having some interesting conversations recently about the R number and exponential growth. And yeah, so internet delay, that's an interesting connection with music there, Gemma. Gemma did say, actually, she was asking if you can make connections between maths and music, primary and secondary. Interestingly, our second son is his real gift, his real passion is music. And
yeah.
Sorry, go on.
I don't, you know, I'm not musical, so I don't know. And I've heard that there's a strong link between maths and music. And I think even like classical music, for some reason, gets another part of the brain, the mathematical part of the brain working. But I just can't. I don't know. But music, like maths, is full of patterns. So
yes,
the two are linked in that way. Your maths is full of maths. Really, is not about numbers. That this is the conception that we all have, but it's more about looking for patterns in the world around us.
So that. Yeah.
So yeah, maths is about patterns. So yeah, there must be a
Definitely,
link,
there
and
are
so
connections.
if you can encourage music and maths at the same time, or play classical music while you're doing some maths.
I think musical understanding definitely helps maths, doesn't it? There's some connection in the brain. And there's a brilliant TED talk. I don't know if anyone's seen, there's a TED talk called The Science of Pattern, where he's talking about maths as the science of pattern, which is a lovely way, I think, to describe maths. So yeah, I mean, anything to do with spotting patterns in things.
Yeah, so Claire's just saying that they've been planting seeds. There's a bit of multiplication, so when you plant the seeds in rows and columns, you are multiplying.
Gardening.
So so all of those things are really just real life ways of introducing the math. So you can talk about 5 times 8 rather than doing 8 plus 8 plus 8 plus 8 plus 8. You could do 5 times 8, and then your kid think, oh, okay, because they've got a real life connection, a real life hook.
That's right, the hooks.
A context for learning the math. So you're not just talking about 5 times 8 as a just arbitrary numbers, but they're actually seeing what 5 times 8 looks like in a seed tray or whatever it is.
Yes, that's a good way to think of it. It's like you're creating the hooks that later the abstract ideas will hang upon. I think let's move into talking a little bit more about moving on into the secondary years, because it was interesting actually thinking about our second son. We had boys who let's talk about the older two for a minute, who both, I mean, they're older now, right? So they both, having had this kind of informal education, both managed to get a GCSE in maths. And one of them was very mathematically inclined always, and would have, just loved that kind of, all these kinds of challenges. And our second son learnt after only just 3 terms in school that he was no good at maths. That's what he said. And I don't think that idea ever really left him. And he certainly wasn't keen on all these kinds of mathematical challenges, but loved cooking, loved being in the kitchen, loved gardening, some of the things we've been mentioning, loved music. Music is his real passion that's really lit him up always. And we found that when he got to tackling GCSE at age 14, which was really the first time he'd done that kind of more formalized maths and problem solving, he was tackling it, tackling the problems. And I think children who learn in this way have the ability to approach problems and look for solutions in a really open-minded way. So they didn't get kind of hung up on, oh, but what's the formula? Which formula is it? I don't know how to do this. It was more like, this problem, how would I approach that? And looking at it.
Yeah. I
what
mean,
would you say?
I think, so this is what I would say. So whenever you've got, and I'm going to go back to the primary if you don't mind, because this is where it all needs to start. So whenever they've got a question, and maybe it's a wordy question, then what they need to do is visualize the problem, right? So the first thing you need to encourage your children to do is visualize it. And if they can't visualize it, get a piece of paper or a whiteboard and start drawing it, and even introduce props so that they've got a visual way of looking at the problem, and that will help them not only in their primary years but right the way through. Because I did A-level maths and I still use those visual props. Even now, when I'm working out something, I have to draw it out. I have to do some doodles. I have to label it and so on. So start drawing, get your kids drawing the problems out, get them using props, get them to tabulate things and see patterns. All of those things are going to help them understand it. So they're not relying so much on a formula, but they're really, really thinking about the problem and thinking about the problem from first principles. And maybe by drawing the thing or visualizing it, they will know what maths to draw upon, rather than thinking panic, what formula do I use? So so get your kids drawing. Start in the early years as well. Start asking open-ended questions. So rather than having a worksheet full of maths questions, you could ask them, how could I make the number 24? You could use add, times, take away, whatever you want. How could I do that? And they'll probably come up with 50 different sums, and you've not had to use a worksheet to do that. They've had to think about that. And
like more an open-ended question.
Yeah, open-ended questions are great. Or how could I make an area? If they're learning about rectangles and perimeters, and you say to them, well, the perimeter of a rectangle is 24. How many ways can you kind of draw this rectangle, and which one has the biggest area, and things like that? So again, you're drawing upon the connection between perimeter, the length around the rectangle, and area, the space inside the shape. Yeah. So, sorry, are we moving on to?
Well, I wanted to just go on to sort of moving up kind of into key stage 3, because some people had said that was kind of where they were at, and what the worry then that maybe they've been able to allay in the primary years, perhaps beginning to rear its head and thinking, oh, should we be formalizing things now? And I mean, I don't know what you would say about, let's talk about key stage 3, which is like from the first 3 years of secondary education, so like let's say 11 to 14. What would your thinking be?
Again, I always find it helpful, by key stage 3, they're doing a lot of stuff. They're doing area, they might be doing Pythagoras, areas of circles, and so on. And what I would say is, get your child to try and think about what they've learned, or reflect on what they've learned, and talk about the problems. And again, it's the same thing. They've got a problem in front of them. Take away all the numbers, or make the numbers really easy. So look at the question that they've got, and replace the numbers with easier numbers to work with, and then see if they can figure it out. And if they can figure it out with the easier numbers, then start saying, okay, well, what did you do? And they might be able to tell you, I added those up, or I times those two numbers, and then you can say, well, what do you think you have to do with this problem then? And they might say, well, I would do the same thing, and they've come to an understanding without you having to tell them or go through any formulas. So just talking about the problem is the way into maths, and it will increase their mathematical understanding. Or take the numbers away and talk about, I'm just thinking about a container. If I had a problem with a container filling up with water, and I asked you, well, how long is it going to take to fill the container? They've got to come up with questions, right? So, how big is the container is what they would ask. Like, how big is the container? And you might give them proportions, and they say, well, I've got to work out the volume of the container, and then you say, well, how would you do that? And you're building up slowly. You're building up this mathematical picture of what's going on, and then you might say, well, there's water pouring. Then they might think, well, how fast is the water pouring in the container? Because I can't work that out without knowing how fast the water's pouring. So you might give them that, and then they may be able to work out how to do the problem. So whenever you've got a problem in the textbook, strip it right down and talk about the problem without any numbers, and see what discussion you have, and then start working on the problem again.
But you've just mentioned a textbook there. I mean, I don't think we had a textbook in the house until the boys were 14, right? I mean, it depends what kind of approach you're going to take.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's important to have, as your child's starting to grow into their teens, and you start to talk with them about, different qualifications or routes that they might want to take, things they might want to look at, how they might want to pursue their education and their goals. Consent's always been very important in our home education. So talking with the boys about what kind of approach they wanted to take to things. And for our older two still went for very kind of project-based learning through what I would say are those key stage 3 years, and still I found that it was similar to the primary years, right? But it deepened their level of understanding and exploration deepened. So for our eldest son, who has a great passion for engineering and always did have, it was all about understanding engines and machines. But as his exploration of those kinds of subjects grew into his teens, and he was exploring more, so he needed more understanding of physics, and he got very interested in chemistry, didn't he, as he got older, and so the maths began to be more relevant to those kinds of subjects, and he wanted to dig in deeper. He did a lot of very practical hands-on projects through those years, key stage 3 years. He used a lot of YouTube to learn more about kind of specialist areas of interest. And Joe too, didn't he? He was much more project oriented in those years, and he was interested in kind of more technology type issues and things, as well as his music. What would you say about that? Like,
so all those things projects? Again, they don't those all of those things, like stripping apart a car, what's really going on there? So what Elias was doing was stripping the engine and trying to work out how it all works. Now that doesn't there is no direct translation from that to being able to do a Pythagoras question, for example, in an exam. And maybe a lot of you are going to end up going down the exam route. You don't have to, by the way, but
no, we'll get to that in a minute.
Yeah. So the point I'm trying to make is Elias is learning how to work things out for himself.
That's it.
And so as long as your children are able to work things out for themselves, and work out problems for themselves, then when it comes to the formal maths and learning how to do an exam, they will get there. But you have to trust in that process of working things out for themselves. So that's all I would say on that. And they became very good at working things out. So it wasn't a massive leap, like from very little formal maths to actually getting on and doing an exam, right?
Figuring out the problems on the paper.
Yeah.
Because they were used to figuring things out.
That's right. So yeah, I don't know how we did it, but I just have this trust that as long as they are able to work things out, they will be able to do it, because you can, once they've learned how to learn and once they've learned how to think, they can do those things anyway. But I understand how that could be a very big leap, like a faith leap for some people. So maybe you want to do other projects. Yeah, projects are really good. So
there's some interesting. Claire's made the point there that in school her boys moved very quickly onto new maths before they had really understood the basics, so they didn't really understand the concepts. And Gulsum's asking a similar question there: is it better to spend more time mastering the basics to have a good foundation? And I think people worry a lot that if they just kind of trust the mathematical process, children to kind of move through and develop mastery in mathematics, that there'll be something missing, some piece that will be missed. And
yeah, so that's interesting. Like I'm not really if they haven't like understood like the concept of number or place value or something like that, and they're moving on to something else when they haven't really grasped something that's fundamental to the next bit, then they are moving on too quickly, and that's what happens, right? So kids always like feel like they're thinking because they didn't really get the first bit in the first place. So
it's moving too fast then.
It is moving too fast.
If your curriculum focus, then if the curriculum is you're moving with the curriculum rather than with the child, it's actually more likely that things are going to get missed than if you're focusing on the child and building in good conceptual understanding, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, so it depends what the basics are.
But then they can learn things, like if they've had this they've got this good solid foundation in real understanding of conceptual matters, then they can learn the things that they need to learn.
Yeah, they can. But I think that's a good point. Like that, I don't know what the basics means, but if you don't have a good grasp of the basics or a stage in the understanding that you really need to understand before you can get on to the next bit.
So then you'd be better to go back, make sure that's sound, to then be able to tackle the
so if you like, let's say they were working on an area and they have no idea what area actually is, you multiply that number by that number, but they don't actually know what they're doing with that. All I know is to work out the area, I do that times that. Then that's not good enough because they haven't understood what they're actually doing. So you need to actually draw the squares and say, look, what you're doing is counting the squares. Now, when it's a circle, that's a bit more complicated because you can't break up the squares, but you might have to break it up into tiny little squares and work out the area of a circle like that. But essentially what I'm saying is that if they need to understand that working out the area of a shape is working out the space inside that shape, and if they haven't understood that, then that is not good enough because you're talking about something that they don't understand the basic concept of.
So you have to go. You'd have to just cover that first.
You have to have a conversation.
Sound. Yes, conversation, visual.
Yeah.
I remember I think Joe was maybe 13 or so when he, for some reason, he needed to draw a pie chart. I can't remember what it was. He'd come across something about pie charts. I need to draw a pie chart. Didn't really know what that was. Well, the next thing I knew, he'd gone to YouTube, looked up, how do I draw a pie chart? Was looking at it, learning it, and then he did it according to. So, the point being that when we develop our children and build them to be self-directed learners, right, they know they're learning how to learn. They know how to learn. They can go and they can source things, and they can find things, find the information that they need to tackle the problem that they need to solve. And so I think so often we're so focused on, oh, they need to get a GCSE maths, or whatever. We're not thinking about mathematical literacy. We're not thinking about their competency. We're not thinking about their confidence, right, in solving these problems and being able to tackle them. And I think that's important. I'd rather have children that were mathematically literate, competent with functional mathematical skills and understanding, and confident in tackling those problems, than I would have a certificate saying I passed a test. And I think it's important, to really think about what your aims and objectives are, and not to be so hung up on the test. And I honestly have confidence that if a child wants to get some kind of numerical recognition or certificate of some capacity, giving them this kind of foundation will give them the confidence and the skills that they need to be able to go out and get that. Now, finding a way forward for your child, depending on what their ambitions are, what they want to do with maths, what kind of what kind of ambitions they have for their mathematics. You might want to think about the pathway that's right for them. And it might not be GCSE, right? It might be. Our boys all wanted to do GCSE maths when it came to it, when we got to about the age 14. We had big conversations about how they were going to move forward, and they all said they wanted to do GCSE in maths, which they did. And Noah at the moment is studying for his from home, but the older two decided to go into a school to do that. Those of you that have followed here a while will know that had various challenges, but they did both get GCSE maths. Joe, it took him 2 attempts. Doesn't really matter. You can resit it if you need to. He needed a bit more time. But you might decide that's the right route for them. Noah's using an online provider, which he wanted to do. He wanted to start that from about the age of, I think it was 13, because he felt that he wanted to take a bit more time over it. You might decide that you'll have somebody to work with your child on their maths. You might decide to just keep it fairly playful and casual, and just continue building maths up through the project work. They might decide to sit functional skills, which is a different qualification.
Yeah, so I think like functional skills is much more sort of testing out everyday math skills. So money, it's not so much about Pythagoras and trigonometry, but more everyday encounters like money, like area. So one sort of project that you could do with your kids is, let's say you have to decorate their room, or it could be some project in the house, and you've got a budget, and have a conversation with your kids, like what sort of furniture do you want, and how much is that going to cost? How much paint do you need on the walls, and how much does a tin of paint cover? So how many tins of paint do you need for the walls? How much flooring do you need to buy? And get them to do a sort of math project on the whole redecoration of their bedroom furniture and all. And then you'll find that they're doing a lot of maths within that. So
your dream room, that would be a good one.
Yeah, or a dream room. So that things like that, or they might want to, like Elias wants to turn his Land Rover into a camper van, so he's having to figure out how much he's going to spend on that, because he doesn't want to blow his budget.
No.
So function, yeah.
Did you talk about that?
Yeah, functional skills is just another qualification that you could have with just everyday maths, really, essentially.
As a alternative to GCSE.
Yeah.
And then the other thing to talk about is building up a maths portfolio and showcasing this kind of mathematical work I know Dawn's on the call here, and her daughter has an amazing mathematical portfolio which showcases her mathematical engagement with various projects, which could be an alternative to, you know, a certification, and could be taken to a job interview and shown, you know, to really show and demonstrate skills and the things that we've talked about, you know, mathematical competency, and you know, if your child's a much more visual learner, or that's going to be a much more appropriate way to record their learning, then that can be an alternative kind of documentation of their learning, if you like. And I think we're going to see the rise of the portfolio in the coming years, especially with everything that's going on with exams at the moment.
I think for Maria Jordan's daughter, that those projects have been really good, and Dawn's just said she loves conceptual maths, and you can really see her understanding and conception of maths just growing, because she's doing, you know, maths is very much more hands-on. They're doing it in their own time, and they're building this understanding of maths by doing these projects. So they're brilliant, and they can be, you know, as she said, designy, arty, and involve different other subjects. So it's not only a maths project, but it's a design project. It's an art project. It could even be a geography project, or an environmental project. You can make an environmental project with a lot of maths, or you can make a geography project with a lot of maths. So yeah, I'm all for project-based learning and the portfolio.
Yeah, and it's interesting to note, isn't it? Because Elias, our eldest son, went into an engineering apprenticeship, and although he did get decent grades at GCSE, but the interview for the apprenticeship was before he'd got his grades, and he took his portfolio along to the interview, and it was the strength of his portfolio that got him the job. He when I'd been wondering what on earth he was doing at some points during his key stage 3 years, one of the things he was doing was vlogging his own kind of projects and the sometimes crazy things that he was up to, but they were very scientific, engineering, experimental things, interesting things. And it ended, you know, his vlog actually ended up being his portfolio, right? He was actually journaling his learning. So, you know, don't be dismissive of your children's kind of quirky hobbies and the way that they're recording their learning, because potentially that's them sharing their story and, you know, actually demonstrating their skills and their competencies. So yeah, portfolios are really interesting. Yeah, your Sarian's over in New Zealand. Portfolios are big over here. Projects are a big one for us. Building chicken hutches, yeah, dolls' houses.
Exactly.
Nunchaku, what's that? Yosarian. Curious. So yeah, I remember our boys building a guinea pig hut. You see, all these things require, don't they, measurements and, you know, design, all these mathematical concepts.
And so by doing those things, those very hands-on things, children get an understanding of maths that they wouldn't get from, you know, listening to the teacher. They just wouldn't. It's not the same quality, is it? Then how can it be better than actually learning hands-on, making a guinea pig hutch or a rabbit hutch? How can a teacher be better than that?
These are the things as well, aren't they? The kind of projects that make you stand out from the crowd. You know, these are the things that you've a martial arts weapon. Thank you.
Right.
I know, of course, I know. Yes, the boys would have known. Yeah. Okay, with you. Naomi's got a question there about portfolios. How portfolios collated? Is the end product virtual, photos saved in folder, or actual physical portfolios like old-fashioned coursework? It could be either.
It could be either. Yeah. I mean, it's worth
whatever works
if they
for
can.
you.
If they're, since your kids are living in the sort of digital age, it's worth maybe. It's basically. I mean, if you've got a Google Gmail account or something, when you take and you've got a smartphone, when you take a picture, it will go into your Google Photos anyway. So
it's all there, isn't it?
It's all there.
I think as your children get older, if they can take ownership as well for their own portfolios, then that can be a really, you know, powerful thing for them, because you're giving them that, you know, agency for recording their own learning. And yeah, for Elias, as I said, it was video, it was vlog, right?
Yeah, and so a portfolio is basically the story of your project from start to finish, and your drafts and how you kind of develop your thinking and understanding. Brilliant way of learning.
Yeah. So but you could. I've got old from when the boys were younger, like files of stuff, like portfolio type things. But as they've gotten older, we've gone more digitally inclined. Yeah, whatever works for you and your family.
Scrapbook.
Yeah. We've gone an hour, guys, already. So I don't know if anyone's got any further questions, just pop them in the chat. I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to say, Krish.
Only there's a really good website. I'll type it in, called Enrich, and it always has lots of little puzzles and activities, suggestions for you to do with your children. And I would really encourage you to have really, you know, even if you don't get the answer, that's not it. The conversation about solving a problem with your kids is so valuable, because every time you do that, they increase their mathematical thinking, and one day they'll learn to solve problems, visualize, do lots of pictures, do lots of drawings, use lots of counters. I still have to in my head. So, and I still, you know, I don't count with my fingers anymore, and there's nothing wrong with that, by the way. If your kids need to count with their fingers, then let them count with their fingers until they've got a really good grasp of numbers. So yeah, Enrich is a really good website. It's got lots of interesting puzzles and things for you to do with your kids, and they're sort of age appropriate. So go for that. Another thing, if you are worried about your kids doing GCSEs, is Corbett Maths, which I used to tell my kids to look at, because it had lots of little videos on how to do different subjects, but that's more if you're going for the exam route. So if they're preparing for exams and they've got to master a skill, there's videos and lots of sort of textbooky questions, and also exam questions and videos, which are really useful. So
but basically we want to encourage you to not be scared of maths.
Yeah, don't be scared. Have the conversation, and
Embrace
say,
it.
rather than saying, "Oh, I was never very good at maths," you could say, "Well, I don't know, but let's have a go together and just try and work it out, and try and use simple numbers, and try and use drawings, and whatever it takes." Chocolate buttons, always good.
Always a winner. I think that so many of us would learn so young that we perhaps weren't very good, very confident in our maths. And maybe all we needed was a little bit more time, right? Maybe lots of us could have been amazing mathematicians, but we lost confidence early on, and that can then hinder our enjoyment and exploration of it. So yeah, enjoy learning alongside your kids and getting stuck in exploring the science of pattern. Yeah, but if there's any more questions, you can always add them under this video later on the Facebook page, or yeah, you know where to find us if you've got more questions and things. But thanks to those of you that have joined us live, and these are monthly lives on this page. So if you've got other things you'd like us to cover in the coming months, then also please comment on the page, and we'll do our best to meet you where you're at. All right, take care. Lovely to see you all.
Bye.